If you have a sales team or you're thinking of starting a sales team, you know that how you manage that team is going to make or break your success. It's either going to go really, really well or really, really bad. So today, what I'm going to do in this video is walk you through all three components of effective sales team management and how you can take your team from just ordinary kind of results to a top tier team. I know this every single year. We scale up our sales team to be quite large to sell all of my conference tickets. We also have some back-end high ticket offers with a different team, but specific to, my conference, we've got a lot of guys, like 15 guys on the phones dialing every single day. We're doing, over $1,000 every single day, like 1,500, 2,000 dials a day. I've learned a thing or two about what it takes to run a sales team and sell a lot of product. So I'm going to be breaking down those three components today. I call this TTA. Okay, cool. So number one is tracking. Okay. So whenever you're looking to start, if you're starting from scratch, sometimes that's better. If you're parachuting in with a current team in place, that can get a little difficult, but it's fixable. Starting from scratch, you want to make sure before any activity gets done that you have tracking in place. Because if you don't, you're flying blind. So number one, you have to track the number of leads that are being generated per day by your business. So, we're talking about sales teams. So on the marketing function side, we can track things like cost per book call. We can, click-through rate, conversion rate, cost per lead, all of that type of stuff. Today, we're focusing on the sales conversion, sales team management. You have to know how many leads are being generated every single day. And depending on your type of business, maybe 2 leads a day per rep is significant if you're doing, high-end enterprise sales. But if you're doing a lot of flow through B2C offers, maybe you have to generate 30 or 40 leads a day per salesperson. It really depends on your business. So for me, and specific to our conference, I want to generate about 25 to 30 new leads, fresh leads per day per rep. For example, let's say I have 10 people on my team. Right? 10 people on the team. I have to generate about 300 new leads per day to feed those guys. Because if you don't, you're not putting fresh blood into the system. And now your reps are just working on stale leads, which there is conversion, but there's nothing in sales like a fresh lead. It's a new opportunity, new prospect. You've got your pipeline leads you can go back to, but you have to have fresh leads coming in every single day. So number of leads generated. This is important. Now, out of that, you have to track number of dials. So you can run your system 2 different ways. You can have a book a call system where people schedule in, or you can have just, hey, you get the information, you outbound dial. For our high ticket stuff, we do this call scheduling. So we're tracking, how many calls were scheduled today versus how many open slots, how many people showed up. But for our conference, for example, we track how many dials because it's just a lot of output. And honestly, it doesn't really depend which one you're doing. If your rep's sitting there, not on a call, if they're not talking to somebody, they should be dialing. So you have to track how many dials. Now you want this to be 100 dials plus a day. I've been running our teams for this specific event for 4 years now. So we've seen, numbers for 4 years come in, there's good things, improvements, things that we would change and do differently. I have never seen somebody have a great day with less than 100 dials. It just doesn't happen. And usually what happens is if you get into a slump, the key there is not, just like changing everything. It's usually just volume, especially for this type of sale, right? So when you're selling things from, let's say, $500 to $5,000 and you're doing a lot of outbound, the number one thing you can control is your volume, your output. So if you're in a slump, let's say you're in a 4-day slump, for the next 5 days that you're dialing, you have to do $150 a day instead of 100. And every single time that's happened, whenever that volume goes up, what you're doing is you're creating opportunity, right? You're just putting yourself in more positions to win. You're putting yourself on the ice in an open area so you can get the pass, right? That's what you're doing. So you have to create those opportunities. Whenever a rep or a salesperson drops under that $100 mark and they're at 80, 75, I basically know in 3 days they're going to have a garbage day because they're not doing the output. You have to get your dials up. But if you're not tracking, you don't really know. Now, there are platforms and tools that you can use to track this stuff. So we use a custom dialer to track all of our dials. We track talk time, wait time, all of these different metrics. That's a little bit more advanced when we get into the nitty gritty. But for right now, you have to track number of leads you're getting and number of dials out. Now, you also want to track number of combos. Now, different people have different ways to track this. My definition of a conversation is when you get into discovery. So I've done other videos. You can check them out on the channel about discovery, which is where you ask a lot of questions about of your prospect, gather a lot of information before you even think of talking about yourself and your product. Right? You have to learn about the customer first. So I count a conversation as we get into discovery and we start having a back and forth. If it's just, in the first 10, 15, 20 seconds, that doesn't count. Just because somebody picked up I don't care. I care about conversation. So I know some dialers they'll use, oh, well, if you've been connected over 2 minutes, then it counts as a conversation. No, we actually manually count these at the rep level because I want to know how many conversations they got into, real conversations. And then so after that, we're going to track number of qualified, because what happens is after discovery, after you ask a whole bunch of questions about your prospect to find out what their situation is, you can determine whether or not they're a fit or not a fit for what you're doing, for your product, your service, whatever it is. So if you know how many conversations you got into and you know how many qualified people you spoke with, that gives you a really good indicator on the quality of leads being generated and who's picking up. Because let's say you have 10 conversations and six of them are qualified, that's great. That means that you can go ahead and pitch an offer service to 60% of the people you just spoke with. That's awesome. But if only 3 out of 10 of those people are qualified, we probably have a marketing issue on the marketing side. And I've got other videos on that. But today we're talking specifically about sales process. So we're tracking number of leads, number of dials, the volume, the output, the number of conversations, and the number of qualified people that you're talking to. Now we're going to track number of pitches. So you can call this offers. I don't care what word you use. We use pitches, but how many times did you talk about your service, present it as a solution, and ask for the sale? That's it. So maybe out of 10 conversations, 5 of them are qualified, and then you pitched 4 times because one person had to cut you off, and you booked a reschedule call. Great. Okay, so you had 4 pitches on the day, and then we track number of sales. If you're not counting all of these numbers, you're flying blind, because what this allows you to do is reverse engineer. So if you have a rep that's underperforming and they're not making sales, they're getting down, if you're tracking these stats right here, you can instantly diagnose any problem. If they're like, oh, well, I'm not getting enough sales, whatever. Well, and then you go through, well, how many leads did you get? Oh, I got 30. Great, you're on point, at least for my numbers. How many dials did you do? 60. Huge issue. No, like you're short by 40%. So there's the issue right there. Now, once they fix the dials and they have the volume up, how many conversations are you having? Oh, I only had 2 today. Well, that's under standard. So now we probably have to work on training in terms of the first 30 seconds of the call, being sticky with it and overcoming those stalls that come up as soon as you pick up the phone. For example, oh, hey, while you do your intro, oh, I'm busy, call me back. Or, oh, not interested. You got it. You have to have a stall overcomes that will get you into discovery, and you have to be really sticky with it. So that's probably an issue with how they're starting the call. Once they figure that out, well, how many people are qualified? Oh, 2. Well, if everybody else is saying they're having, let's say, 50, 60% qualified conversations, and then this person is saying, well, only 15% of their conversations are qualified, they're probably not sure about the criteria and they need additional support and work on that. And then, hey, well, then at that point, you've got 6 qualified calls per day. Great. How many times did you pitch? Oh, twice. Well, then you have to work on having confidence pitching it. And then if they're not making any sales, it's the closing and staying in the pocket, right? So you can see how you can instantly diagnose the issue at every step of the way. But if you're missing some of these stats, you're flying blind. Like even if you're tracking number of dials and then number of sales, but you're not tracking the number of conversations or qualified calls or pitches, you're just not collecting the data that you need to effectively diagnose. So think of it as a doctor, right? Somebody goes to the doctor, something's not right. They're going to do an exam. They're going to look at you and examine you to figure out what the problem is. If you don't have this, you can't do the exam on your business and on your sales pipeline. So you have to track these numbers, okay? So that's number 1, tracking. Number 2 is training. Now, you probably guessed this was coming up next based on what I was talking about here. You have to have training. So, again, to use my own examples, for my ticket team, we do call reviews every single day. Every single day, we are reviewing calls, listening to calls, diagnosing what went well, what didn't go well, so we can improve. It's kind of like you look at any professional sports team, football, baseball, soccer, hockey. They all watch game tape. They all watch themselves and they clip things. Oh, this was a great play. This was a bad play. Why did we do this? Let's back up and figure out what led to this bonehead play, right? We have to watch game tape. Now in sales, our game tape are call recordings, Zoom meeting recordings, however you're doing your meetings, whether it's video or phone, it doesn't matter. We have to have a record of it. Because what happens is, I get this all the time, especially with new reps. They get off the phone, oh, that was a great call. Salespeople always overestimate how well a call went. Every single time. We always overestimate how good of a job we're doing. So if we're just basing our feedback on what the rep is telling us, we're not getting the complete picture because the rep is looking at it through rosy-eyed goggles. So what we need to do is have an impartial record of the conversation, which is the call recording, the video recording, and then we can sit down and review it with the rep. And 9 times out of 10, the rep's going to say something like, oh man, I can't believe I missed that. Or, oh man, that sounds really bad. I can't believe I said that. There's always things that happen. So for you to be an effective coach and train your reps, you need to have these records available to use as source material for your training. So number one, you have to record everything. Now, number two is once we have those recordings, we can diagnose and assess what's not working right. No, but maybe it's qualification or the pitching or objections, whatever it is. You have to practice. So again, to use a sports analogy, if I need to practice my free throws, I'm not going to do it like once and then leave the court. I need to stand there and drill and do it over and over and over and over and over again, nonstop, with the right technique, right? So the coach is going to be there watching you as you throw, you correct your elbows, whatever. That's what you have to do in sales. So the way we overcome that is role play. You have to role play every single day. So let me put daily here. Every single day, you have to be role playing, watching recordings, doing your call reviews. Because what happens with role play, that gives you a chance to mess up. We never want to practice on the customer. We want to practice amongst ourselves. We want to make all the mistakes in training. So what role play does is, maybe your team is having trouble with objection. Maybe you're commonly getting, I want to think about it, and then the reps don't know how to handle it and they're losing. So what you want to do is you want to assess that, review all the recordings of the calls, do those call reviews, teach exactly what's going on. So, hey, okay, well, when you get this is how we want to handle that and address it. Okay, so you teach it. Then you want to put it into practice. So that's through role play. So it's like, hey, I've just told you exactly what to do. What we're going to do for the next 20 minutes is drill specific to this objection. So now your reps will split off, whether it's on Zoom, you can do breakout rooms, or in person, you go to different rooms or different areas of the office. You pair up, and all that rep's going to do nonstop for 10 minutes is role play that objection. So their partner is going to give them the objection that you're working on. The rep's just going to overcome it. Now, the first couple times it's going to be kind of slow and it's going to not be so fine-tuned. But at the end of the 10 minutes, once they've done it a whole bunch of times, it's just going to be like clockwork. And the standard you want to get to is if you ask any rep, like out of the blue, and you just give them the objection, they should be able to just like whittle, like just rhyme, have it flow off their tongue. Just like they rhyme it off, no issues whatsoever. It's just a reflex. That's where you want to get to with your team. But you don't get there without practice. And so, my philosophy is we want to practice together as a team, just like any good hockey team does, right? You can do workouts on your own at home, whatever, but we practice as a team here. So everybody has to role play every single day. It doesn't matter how good a rep is, there's always something we can improve on. So maybe it's just tone and pace, because a lot of salespeople, they tend to talk really fast. I'm a fast talker too. So it's just practicing. How do we slow down? When we're making the offer, the first ask for the sale, what's our pacing like? What's the tone? Am I getting too excited? Let's run through the same thing. We record it, we watch it, we train, like we teach, and then we role play. That's what you have to be doing every single day. Not many sales teams do that. We do a lot of interviews when we're hiring for our team, and the number of people who have never done a call review, never done training, never done role play in the office is staggering. Insane. So if you're starting a team from scratch, 100% daily role play, no questions asked. If you're currently running a team, but it's not efficient, if they're not getting the results, you have to institute this daily call reviews, then you teach, and then you role play. No questions asked. Okay, so we've done the first T, the second T, now we have the A, and it's accountability. So I can speak from my own personal experience. I've got a competitive background, sports background, being held to a high standard. Your A team players, your A players on the team, they want to be held to a standard because that allows them to measure their success against everybody else. And in any sales team, everybody should want to be the top dog. Everybody should want that number one job. And if you're not holding people accountable, then you're letting your team down because now they can't have that benchmark and then improve on that benchmark. So what accountability looks like. So number one is you're going to be tracking results, right? Number two, track action. So salespeople love seeing when they sell, right? So number one, you're going to track all of the sales they get. So if somebody makes 5 sales that day, great, put it up on the board. And everybody should see very clearly on the board how many sales everybody's getting per day. Great. And then you have your weekly total. That makes sure everybody's aware of what's going on, and somebody new on your team, instantly they know who the top people are so they can watch them. Awesome, right? But number two, you want to start tracking the action. So down here in number one, for the first T, tracking, we're tracking leads, dials, combos, qualifieds, pitches, sales. Now that you have those numbers, you want to actually celebrate that and track and hold your people accountable. For example, let's say for 2 days, one of your reps was able to get 120 dials, right? And that got them improved conversation number. For you as the sales manager, you have to hold your salesperson to that new standard now that they've set for themselves, right? The proof is in the pudding. They got more conversations with more dials. So if you see them start slipping back to 100 dials a day instead of 120, you as the manager have to hold them accountable and say, hey, listen, we're tracking this. Celebrate the 120 dials. Hey, that's awesome. You got X percentage more conversations. But once that volume starts decreasing and creeping down again, you have to hold them to that standard because they've set that. They got the results. That's in their best interest. Because with sales, like everybody's like this, right? We know what's good for us. Everybody knows that eating vegetables and protein is good for us. It's healthy. But then people slip up and then we start eating at, McDonald's, and you start eating French fries and junk food. Everybody knows what's right for them, but we need somebody beside us to help guide us and keep us on track. That's what a good coach does. That's what a sales team manager does. You're basically coaching a sports team at this point. So if you have a rep that expanded their ceiling to $120 and then they start to slip down again, you have to hold their feet to the fire and hold them accountable to that new standard of excellence that they set for themselves. Now, the third thing we want to track is targets. And what I found is the strongest targets are, they're numbers, but it's the reason why behind the numbers. So I'll put why here. For example, let's say that a rep is getting married in 8 months and they've got to fund a wedding, they've got a honeymoon, all of this type of stuff. That rep is going to set numbers that they want to hit for the week and for the month. But what we want to do as a coach is tie that to the actual tangible result. Like, what does that actually do for them? So instead of saying, oh yeah, I want to close like 10 deals, this week, tie it to the actual goal, the picture they have in their mind. Well, hey, if you close 10 deals this week, you're funding 20% of your wedding. Like, you have to make it real and tangible for them so they can see it, smell it, taste it. Once you do that, that's tapping into that inner motivation. And now, when they're feeling really low, they've just had a bunch of bad calls in a row. Instead of just seeing the number of dials they have to do is like, oh, check. Well, now it's like, oh, well, like, I want to fund 20% of my wedding. I know it's coming up. Like this is what I have to do. And it keeps them on the bandwagon, keeps them on the horse for longer. And so they're not going to burn out and fizzle out. Because with sales, like, we always have those ups and downs. So you want to set those targets. So for the accountability, we have to be tracking first to hold them accountable. We want to track the results. Great. Celebrate it. Put it on the board. We also have to track those actions. What are they doing to get the results? Because I can tell you, there are some days where a rep's going to get blank. No sales whatsoever. But as long as they're doing the right action and doing the dial, they're getting the right leads, they're doing the dials, they're having the conversations, they're still qualifying the right way, they're still pitching the right way. Because in sales, like, sometimes it's a numbers game. There's bad days and then there's really good days. If that rep continues with the right actions for another day, 2 days, 3 days, I know those sales aren't going to catch up to them somehow. It's the sales gods, right? It always comes back to help you out. But if the actions aren't there, then we have an issue. And also, if the results are there without the actions, we're going to see a decline. Because generally what happens is this. If a rep, and these are the two levers we pull, right? If you have a lot of activity up here, great. Now they start getting really busy. So this is activity. And then the activity is going to decrease because now the results are coming here. And now they have to do all this closing and setup and all of that type of stuff. So what happens is they get all these results, but now the results are dropping. Their activity's down here. And now they have to ramp their activity up all over again. Typical situation with real estate agents. I used to be one, and that happened all the time. You would do a whole lot of prospecting, then you would get really busy, show houses to everybody, and then you would sell a whole bunch of stuff, and you're like, oh, well, I've got no new clients. Well, because you took your eye off of the prospecting and the activity you needed. So what you really want to do as a coach, a sales team lead, is you want to make sure your activity is consistent across the board, no matter what happens with your results. Results can ebb and flow like this, but you always want to stay consistent with your activity, so that way you're always feeding that pipeline for the rep. So no matter what happens today, as long as the activity is solid and consistent, that there's going to be something that your rep can hunt for tomorrow. The activity dies, everything dies. So as much as it's great to celebrate and reward the results, you always have to track the actions as well and hold the rep accountable to the actions. Great, you just sold 5 deals today, amazing. But your dials are not up to standard. Tomorrow, I want to see you back up at $100 a day minimum, right? It's in their own best interest. And you got to explain why. It's like, hey, John, like, we both know why your dials. Because if we look at your results for the past 2 months, every time you've been over 100 dials, you've had a great day. So, I want to make sure we continue that. And the action that leads to that is the dials. So, and that now you want to hold them accountable to hitting that standard and then setting those targets. If you're starting from scratch with this type of stuff, implement it right away. It's easy, clean, fresh slate, do it from day one. If you're already managing a sales team, you're going to have to get buy-in. And the fact of the matter is not everybody's going to buy in. So if you're used to running a sales team where it's kind of loosey-goosey, wishy-washy, nobody's tracking anything, and now you're implementing these systems here, and then you have your reps not coming on board, you're better off getting rid of those reps who are not going to come on board the new system and find people who will, rather than allowing reps who don't really care about tracking and accountability and the training and the coaching, role play, all of that type of stuff, because it's just going to pull your entire team down. And that's going to be a decision and conversation you'll have to have. We'll do another video on that type of stuff. But for today, sales team management, TTA, so you've got your tracking, you've got your training every single day, then you've got your accountability, making sure that your reps are doing the activity and getting the results, and having that tangible why behind the scenes. That's how you manage a sales team at a really, really high level. So hope this was helpful. Implement it, put it into action, and I'll see you guys next week.